Hi everybody, and welcome to my cosmic weather forecast for the upcoming Capricorn Lunar Eclipse, which happens on the 5th of July 2020. So just a heads up, if you haven't already, do go and check out my eclipse horoscopes. They're on the membership section of my website and are just designed to cover the periods between June and November. Yeah, and if you're not a member, do think about subscribing, because this will give you access to the membership area and it's absolutely free. And then on top of that, I've also done some July geoscopes on YouTube. So these are designed to dovetail with my eclipse forecasts, and they cover the period from the lunar eclipse through the 2 weeks that follow of the waning moon cycle. So what can we expect in terms of overall energies from this particular lunar eclipse? Well, the first thing to say is that it will take place in a cardinal earth sign, Capricorn. This is the counterpart to Cancer, and that was where we had the solar eclipse at new moon. So really this is a balancing out of masculine and feminine energies, particularly paternal and maternal energies. You know, we had that wonderful solar eclipse energy, which was all about the mother goddess and about nurturing and self-care and opening up the heart chakra, and now there's the counterpart energy, the more practical element, which is the stabilizing of emotions, developing emotional resistance, working out how to implement this into the 3D world. So I do see this very strongly as being about a balancing of divine masculine and feminine energies. Overall, though, the field is likely to be intense, and that's because we're coming off the back of that Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, also in Capricorn, which happened on the 30th of June, so just a couple of days before this particular event. So that energy will still be quite fresh, bearing in mind that Jupiter and Pluto are slow-moving planets, so their energy will definitely key into this particular event. In terms of key planets, the moon will be making a trine to Uranus, so this should bring some positive shifts and some unexpected developments that I see as bringing hope back to a lot of people, particularly when it comes to matters of the heart. Uranus is in the sign of Taurus, though, and the moon does govern the collective, so on a more mundane level this could raise important issues, or we could see developments with regards to particularly food and food security. I think that we could see some interesting developments and innovations when it comes to agriculture, for example. The Sun will also be making a conjunction to Sirius and Canopus, the two fixed stars in Cancer. Now, the Sun will be taking the position that Mercury was at when we had the solar eclipse. So this is really about taking the truths and the realizations that we had at the solar eclipse and starting to embody them, because, you know, Mercury is about communication and thought, but the Sun is about being. So this is about walking your talk, it's about embodying your truth, it's about being the change you want to see in the world. It's also about allowing yourself to shine, because the Sun and Sirius are both associated with very bright light. So I think it's also about coming to terms with the fact that it's time to put yourself out there on some level. And this is kind of part of the process of being of service. So, you know, it's reconciling and coming to terms with that particular energy. Also, Saturn will just have regressed back into the sign of Capricorn. So this is where it was around about the time of the equinox. And this is really emphasizing that Capricorn energy. So I think the way to see this is that we are linking back to the energies of the last 2.5 years or so, when Saturn was touring through Capricorn, and there may be some leftover things to wrap up or some unfinished business left over from that particular cycle that now need to be sorted out and closed off between July and December. As I said, Pluto and Jupiter will also be making a conjunction in Capricorn. So it's a really crowded zodiac space during this particular lunar eclipse. Lots going on. This to me is all about a big reset, but the big reset is now internal. So unlike the 444 gateway, which is when we had the first pass of this particular conjunction, this is now about overcoming internal resistance or blocks to external changes. So it's about that almost counter reaction to the intentions or the slow moving changes that we started to see kind of happening within society, and now this is us having to kind of react or adjust to this energy from an internal perspective. Then as far as relationships are concerned, Venus is now direct. She's moving back through the degrees of Gemini. So she's in the position that she was in round about the end of sort of May. So relationships should start to improve. However, do bear in mind that we've still got that upcoming square to Neptune that happens later this month. So we've still got that hurdle to sort of overcome before, the coast is completely clear. On the plus side, though, Mars is now in Aries, so this is much more decisive energy. The divine masculine is a lot clearer about what they want, and they're prepared to actually go out and get it. So I do see this as kind of inculcating a strong desire for sacred union, romantic pursuit, as well as reconciliations, and that's because Mercury is retrograde in Cancer, and that will continue until around about July the 12th. So don't be surprised if people reach out, want to reconcile, or simply want to make apologies, that kind of thing. But at least Venus is now direct, so the energies are a little bit more trustworthy than when Venus was retrograde. However, as I say, do bear that square to Neptune in mind, because it can bring up a little bit of delusional energy. So just something to be mindful of, until we move past that particular square. So the Sabian symbol for the 14th degree of Capricorn, which is where the moon will be at this particular lunar eclipse, it's very interesting actually, particularly given the sort of spate or the wave of statue kind of toppling that's been happening in the wake of the Black Lives Matter kind of movement. It's an ancient bas-relief carved in granite, which remains a witness to a long-forgotten culture. So this is really alluding to the idea of relics from the past that are carved in stone, monuments perhaps to forgotten cultures, as well as archaeological remains that perhaps tell us something about past cultures. So this has got a kind of a twofold message, I think. On the one hand, it's kind of saying, we shouldn't sort of see everything as being kind of written or carved in stone. There is room to rewrite the future, and it doesn't have to be based on the past. We don't have to keep repeating the lessons of the past. That's one thing. The other thing is that we shouldn't be too reverential to kind of past traditions if they are outdated, if they are prejudicial or toxic. So there may be a need to perhaps let go of things that have outworn their sell-by date. So that's the one thing. On the other hand, we shouldn't necessarily throw the baby out with the bathwater. For example, there might be lessons from the past, from Atlantis, from Lemuria, from ancient Egypt, that help us to kind of deal with present situations, because let's face it, there's very little that's new under the sun. So I think we should also just bear in mind that there is some wisdom that we can also tap into, which may be helpful at this present time. I mean, for example, if I think about, as an astrologer, a lot of the astrological information comes to us from cuneiform tablets that come from ancient Mesopotamia. If we didn't have that information, there's a lot about astrology that we wouldn't know, except what the Greeks kind of wrote down. So I think it's really important to kind of keep that balance between being respectful of the past, of learning from the past, but also not of kind of being too reverential and getting frozen or frigid, kind of locked in stone, and not being able to kind of grow and move forward. So here we have the astrological chart for the upcoming July lunar eclipse. Now it's interesting for a number of reasons, some of which I've already touched on. But the important thing, I think, to point out is, first of all, the stellium of star points and chart points that are happening in the sign of Capricorn on the right-hand side of the chart. So a really packed zodiacal sign. We've got Saturn, which has just regressed back into Capricorn. Then we've got Pluto and Jupiter, which are still within the same degree. So that conjunction will still be very, very fresh. And then we've got the Moon, which is making a conjunction to Vega, which forms one of three fixed stars that are really prominent in the constellation of Lyra. And then on the other side of the chart, we've got the Sun in Cancer, which is making a conjunction to Sirius. Now I can't put that on the chart because I can only put one set of fixed stars at a time. And nearby is Mercury, which is still retrograde. Now notice that both of these are making a red triangle to a chart point up at the top, which is Black Moon Lilith. So this is T-square energy, and so Black Black Moon Lilith is almost at the midpoint in Aries between Cancer and Capricorn, and I think this is pointing to something that I think is a general theme of this particular lunar eclipse, which is the balancing of polar opposite energies. So first of all, we've got the Sun and the Moon in opposite signs of the zodiac. Secondly, they are contacting fixed stars that are going to be forming an alignment. So this is, Vega on one hand, Sirius on the other. And then on top of that, we've got the Earth in the middle. So if you think at a full moon, we're talking about the Sun and the Moon being on opposite sides of the horizon. So isn't it interesting that the Moon is in the west and the Sun is in the east, and then sort of at the top of the chart, we've got this triangle of, energy that is kind of concentrating on Black Moon Lilith. Now, Black Moon Lilith in and of itself is about the dark side of the moon, and isn't it interesting that at a lunar eclipse, what happens is that the Sun uses it comes between it aligns with the Earth so that the Earth is directly in the center of this polar axis, and then this means that the Sun's light casts a shadow of the Earth onto the Moon's surface, so the Moon then turns a kind of blood red color. So this is really about shadow work and shadow energy that is kind of coming to light or being revealed, or that, in other words, hidden things either from the subconscious or they're being hidden from us in social terms from the public domain, are now kind of coming to the surface and are being asked to be seen, healed and transmuted. And that's what I feel is happening on both a personal and an interpersonal, as well as a kind of global and even galactic level. So this is happening at multiple levels of reality. And on the personal level, I think that if we think about where the Moon is being conjunct to the fixed star Vega, Vega is very closely associated with the myth of Orpheus, because of course Lyra is the harp of Orpheus. And so for me, this really keys into myths and kind of archetypes around magic, music, enchantment and seduction. And of course Black Moon Lilith is all about that kind of female sexual energy that can either be used well or can be used in a manipulative way, or it can be abused. So Black Moon Lilith energy is generally immature energy that needs to kind of grow or come fully into its power. So I do see Black Moon Lilith as being very closely associated with Saturn in his form as the devil. So this is the sort of tempting, that kind of bondage, but also all those sort of toxic things like sexual addiction, the myth of the abuser and the sort of the sexual, it's really kind of tied into for example Daddy's Little Girl energy, Lolita types of myths, and the counterpoint, so there's an imbalance of power basically within the dynamic. And I think that may be important now, but then on a sort of higher level, as I say, I do think that there's some kind of galactic alignment happening between Sirian and Lyran energy, so that takes things into another dimension. So that may be important from the point of view of starseeds. And then there's the solar lunar sort of element, which is about conscious and unconscious, about masculine and feminine. So lots of polar energies that need to be reconciled through healing, transmutation, and a kind of bubbling up of emotions to the surface. And this is going to be a really intense moon from the point of view of emotions. Not only is it a full moon, but it's an eclipse. On top of that, we've got this very intense Jupiter-Pluto energy that's happening. We've also got Mercury retrograde in the very feely sign of Cancer, and we've got the Sun there. So don't be surprised if you feel very emotional at this particular full moon, and just allow this energy, work through it slowly between the full moon and the waning moon cycle, the sort of 2 weeks that follow. Yes, I think those are kind of the main themes that I want to sort of touch on, other than to say that, of course, Neptune is also retrograde, and Neptune, to an extent, also, I think, it has a kind of natural affinity with the myth of Orpheus in terms of, the affiliation to music, to enchantment, to seduction, to glamour, all those kinds of things. So that may also be significant, particularly given that Venus will be making her final square to Neptune later in July. So this could possibly key into relationships and into the sort of dance between divine masculine, divine feminine. So that it's just also something else to bear in mind, as I say, when we come to the energy of the second half of July. So now that I've done the astrological chart for the lunar eclipse, you're probably wondering, well, how does this affect me? And I have the perfect solution for you. I have done some eclipse horoscopes for each of the 12 zodiac signs. These cover the solar and lunar eclipses and are designed to last from June until December. Those are available on the membership area of my website, so if you haven't subscribed, I do suggest that you sign up. It's free and it will give you access to the more detailed horoscopes that I've done there. But in the meantime, if you want to pause the video and have a look, I have come up with a quick cheat sheet that looks at the life areas likely to be lit up by this particular eclipse for each sign. So this particular eclipse will carry some very important starseed alignments and activations across the Sirius and Lyran kind of axes, so I'm going to get into those in a little bit more detail, but just to say that the video that I did for the solar eclipse in Cancer does go in quite some detail into the sort of Sirian activations that happened then, which may relate to this particular eclipse, because of course solar and lunar eclipses like this in the same pair of signs are twins. So I do urge you to go back and watch that section, the second section of that cosmic weather forecast, because it will feed into and supplement what I'm about to say in the next section. So as I've already touched on when I looked at the astrological chart for the lunar eclipse, this particular event is very interesting from the point of view of starseed alignments and activations. So the luminaries will actually form a polar axis with the Earth in the center between the signs of Cancer and Capricorn, but also between the two alpha stars of Sirius and Lyra. So the Sun will be aligned with Sirius, which is the brightest star in our galaxy, and this is the star of Isis, known as Sothis to the ancient Egyptians. It's also the alpha star in the Canis Major constellation, which is the dog. And then the moon will be conjunct Vega, which is the alpha star in the Lyra constellation, and this is the harp or the lyre of Orpheus. So this is activating kind of Lyran starseed stuff, and the Earth will be in the center between the two. So for me, this is about a kind of trying to find that center point, that still center point, that balance point, what the Egyptians called Mart, between two polar or kind of dual energies. So I'm going to get into Lyran energy in a minute, but I have done quite a lot on the Sirian energy that was activated at the solar eclipse and that I think is now being balanced by Lyran energy. So if you haven't already watched that video, then either go to my IGTV feed or have a look on my website in the membership area for the cosmic weather forecast for the solar eclipse in Cancer, and that will give you the second half is all about starseed activations related to Sirius. So given that we know that there's going to be this alignment of Sirian and Lyran energy, what is this likely to mean? Well, I think the first thing to say is that, the Earth is going to be in the middle between these two energies, between the Sun near Sirius on the one hand and the Moon and Vega on the other. So this already is, to me, about kind of finding the happy medium or the balance between the two. And the Pythagoreans talk a lot about this when they talk about equilateral triangles, the idea being that, to take things from two dimensions, which is a kind of a straight line, a 180-degree line, you need to have a third point that you then pull into another dimension, and this is what creates the triangle, is this kind of midpoint energy that then harmonizes or marries the two. This is the alchemical marriage. So this could mean a blending of divine feminine, divine masculine energies. And it's interesting because if you look at the characteristics of Lyran starseeds, certainly according to Aspen Rain, she would say that Lyrans are very associated strongly with the divine masculine energy because their natural affiliation or their sort of natural gifts and abilities lie in the root chakra. So these are people that like to be very physical. They enjoy kind of earthly and sensual pleasures. They are fearless go-getters. They're very extroverted. So this is very masculine energy. On the other hand, you've got the sort of Syrian energy, which is quite feminine, actually. You know, it's quite introverted. It's all about the feels. It's very magical. It's rooted in the sort of fantasy world, and it involves the sacral and the throat chakras. So this is perhaps a little bit more feminine in energy. That's certainly her interpretation. And if we think about traditionally what these stars are associated with, Lyra is associated, as I say, with the figure of Orpheus, and Sirius is associated with the goddess of Isis, you know, the ancient Egyptian goddess Isis, which is a mother goddess. So I do think that there is this kind of blending of masculine and feminine energies on a number of levels, you know, on a kind of a chakra level, perhaps on a social level, psychological level, but then also perhaps on a kind of galactic level too. So that's maybe one connection, and you know, that may happen as a result of this alignment. The second thing to say, of course, is that Lyrans are some of the oldest souls in our galaxy. They have incarnated into several other star systems, including Sirius, so there is already a connection between Sirius and Lyra. Lyran beings are supposed to be the root race of all humanoid races in our galaxy, and you know, Sirius is also thought to have formed a very important part in seeding and shaping the human race. So you know, these are two kind of master races when it comes to the Earth and humans. And so it's possible that there will be some kind of collaboration that happens, a combining of maybe the best of both worlds that results in new healing technologies, perhaps also ways to save the planet, you know, more innovations that help us to safeguard the natural world. And also, you know, maybe feeding into that Uranian energy, which is all about innovations and technology. So given that Uranus is in the sign of Taurus, I think that this is all about finding ways to produce food that is going to safeguard security, food security for the future, but not necessarily destroy the planet. So, you know, I think looking to people like Zach Bush, for example, and all the work that he's done on agriculture, as well as Elon Musk's brother, Kimball. He's also done quite a lot on you know, growing food vertically and in trucks and that kind of thing. So I think that we could start to see some technologies from Lyra and Sirius coming down in the form of light codes that then spark off ideas in Earthlings, and you know, these then become technologies that you know, are invented in inverted commas. So that's maybe a few ideas for how this energy may work. Of course, you know, I'm not a Starseed channel, so we'll have to see what people like Aspen Rain and others say about this particular alignment, but you know, those are just a couple of ideas for you know, the way that it might work at this particular lunar eclipse. So that's it from me, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, do hit the like button or leave me a comment. And again, just a reminder that if you haven't checked out my geoscopes, then do go to my YouTube channel and check them out. I'd love it if you subscribed. That way, when I post a new forecast, you'll never miss out. But in the meantime, I'm wishing you all the best. I hope that this eclipse brings illumination. And I'll catch you again in a couple of weeks when we have another new moon in Cancer to look forward to. So till then, all the best and many full moon blessings.